All right, Randall, welcome.
Finally.
Yeah, we've known each other for quite some time when you were in the tech scene, and now you're doing your own nonprofit. So,
Yeah,
can you quickly share about what does your nonprofit do?
sure. So I run a nonprofit called Books Beyond Borders, and the idea really started about 3 years ago when I was tracking in Nepal and decided that I want to make a career, so I had to leave my job. Came back to Singapore and wanted to raise some money. So it was a very simple idea to collect and sell secondhand books to raise money, and then send 100% of all the money we raised to the field to support underfunded schools in Nepal. And we've been working on it for a year and a half right now, and I'm thankful for a lot of supporters and book readers in Singapore. We have done a lot of different projects and continue to do so every single day.
Got it. You mentioned on your website, like one of your mantras is courage over fear.
Yeah.
How was it like, when you first started? What were the kind of fears you had, and what did it take to make the leap?
Sure. I think of all people, you would probably understand what it means to take a leap, especially from the corporate sector to the non-profit sector. I think for me, one of the biggest things that I was worried about was financial stability, and kind of moving in the entire sector that I have no experience in. So I spent the last 5 years in the tech sector, as you know, and moving in this sector was completely new for me. I didn't know how to fundraise, and I didn't quite enjoy doing it. And also trying to work on global problems like poverty and illiteracy. It's a very complex issue, and I wasn't sure I was up for it or not. So that was kind of like an entire new chapter for me.
Yeah.
And I guess, as you mentioned, the mantra really means a lot for me, because the reason why I decided to spend 2 weeks walking to the foot of Mount Everest it started all because of a challenge to do one thing that scares me. And ever since then, I've continued to live on this mantra to do one thing that scares me, and also for our team right now at Books Beyond Borders.
Nice. Can you share more? Like, how often do you do something that scares you?
Right. So it's a very interesting question. For every single one I meet, from tech executives to students, I always ask them and challenge them this question, which is, if there's one thing that you really want to do this year, but you're afraid for whatever reasons, what would it be? I find that it challenged a lot of people to think about, taking the leap. And for me, I try to live on it every single day. I have a lot of insecurities and about my personal life, about the project, and living with it is something that allows me to continue push things forward professionally and personally. So a good example is fundraising. I'm not a great fundraiser. I think a lot about what people think, asking for donations and stuff like that. But always remember that to do things that scares us, it's the only way we can continue to go out of our comfort zone and push things forward. And it's been great, ever since. Once you do it, you kind of feel powerful that you can do anything. And I hope that I continue to live on this mantra.
Yeah.
And also I hope the rest of the people can try to do something that they are scared of. It doesn't have to be big.
Yeah.
It can be small little things, but it adds up to a lot of big impact.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and there are certain thoughts that come to my mind. One is this concept of Memento Mori, which talks about the inevitability of death, like everyone's going to die, and and also carpe diem, right? Like living your life. I guess Steve Jobs also famously said in his speech, right? Like he used to ask him, if today was the last day of my life, would I do what I'm about to do? So very interesting. Even and talking about like going out of your comfort zone, in some ways, like security is for cadavers, right? Like when you die, like that's when you get ultimate security, right? So in some ways, it's just a perception. It's just perceived security, but you never have complete security, right? Like, I mean, right now you look at the COVID-19 situation, right? Like it's kind of creating this whole atmosphere of insecurity.
Right.
So yeah, you're right about that. And I have you thought for this year, like, so is it fundraising for you?
Well, fundraising is an ongoing battle. So it's something that I overcome every day. But I think for me, so the reason why I say it's one thing that scares you because it's measurable, right? What's um, you got to measure it in order
True.
to know that you actually did something. So I have a lot of different fears that I try to overcome it every day. Or dance with it, right? Like Seth Godin says, it's one of my favorite
Yeah.
quotes. But if there's one thing that I really want to do this year, is to it's actually to go through Vipassana. And I think I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a 10-day
Yeah.
silent meditation
Yeah.
retreat.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've always wanted to get involved, but I've been putting it for a lot of years right now. I think that it has a lot of benefit, not just to me personally, but also give me a more sense of clarity to build the organization, especially how difficult it is to run a non-profit like that, especially in Singapore. So that's one thing that I want to do. I'm saying it now to keep myself accountable.
That's
And
good.
hopefully I get to do
That's
it.
good.
Yeah.
All the best. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another thing you talk a lot about in your organization, and I can see from your website as well, is this concept of transparency, right?
Yeah.
And where did that stem from? Like, why do you place such an emphasis on transparency in your organization?
Right. I think, as human beings, we all operate um, based on trust, right? And to run, regardless if it's a social organization or a for-profit organization, the only way, and I believe, it's to build based on trust. Trust comes internally from your team that you're leading, to the customers that trust your brand. You talk about the tribes, right? And it all really trust is the only thing that kind of ties everything together. And so for us, we hold a lot of donations. People trust us to put their money with us, and so I think that is the only way for us that we can ever operate for the long term. And also, secondly, there's a lot of negative connotations around nonprofits and charities, especially in Singapore itself. Um, and if we don't put that as one of the core values and principles to run this organization, it's very difficult for us to scale. It's very difficult for people to associate with our brand and stuff like that. So that is one of the things that is non-negotiable for us when we start. That also means if we fail, we have to admit it. No white lies.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quote from Muhammad Gandhi is satyagraha, and that actually means insisting on only the truth. And I hope that we can kind of imbue that into our organization, and not be ashamed to say we fail, but at least we tried.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
there seems to be a movement in this direction, I think, globally, not
Right.
just in nonprofits, but also for profits.
Right.
Just yesterday, one of the leading media channels in India for social impact and good news, they hosted their all hands meeting such that anyone could join. And
Right.
they talked about what are the challenges they're going through, what are their plans, and I thought like that was a very interesting way to involve your community in
Right.
showcasing, like, as an organization, what are the challenges and what are the steps you plan to take, and
Right.
do it. So they used Zoom channel, and they shared the link with their community on Twitter, and
Right.
there were so many people who joined it, and they could actually
Right.
witness the inside working of the organization. So
Right.
and that's something which even at Give Asia, we've been kind of thinking like perhaps we could use that as a way to, increase the transparency and trust of what
Right.
happens behind the doors, right? Like what happens
Right.
in the working of the organization.
Right. And just since we're on this topic, one of the biggest lessons we learn is that people just want to know the truth. And we failed on projects before, and when you're able to kind of, like what you say, open the boot, right, and be an open book and share about not just the projects you do, but the things you learn and the challenges you face, people are okay with that. It turns out, right? But once they find that you're trying to hide some information, be it good or bad, right? The trust is broken, and it's cliche as it sounds. It takes a lot of time to build trust, right? And just in a moment or in a second, you can kind of break it. So we don't want to put that on the line.
100%
Yeah.
agree. 100% agree.
Right.
You spend a lot of time in Nepal, and
Right.
I wonder if you have any like stories from the ground that you can share of how your work is impacting individuals or communities.
Right. So I'll share with you a little bit about the work that we did at the start versus the work we're doing moving forward. And in the transition, I'll share one story that can lead our decision to do a little bit of a pivot. So we started with a really straightforward projects. We raised money and put 100% to distribute resources to poor villages in Nepal. We started by distributing school bags, and then went on to establish school libraries in poor villages to promote reading. Over time, we learned that it may actually look good on social media and pictures and stuff like that, but when you measure the impact, it's highly questionable. For example, we did library projects before, and after evaluating on our projects, we realized that one of the biggest factor to decide whether a library is benefiting the students, which is the ultimate objective, lies with the teacher. So you can't establish a library without providing teachers training, without providing them the tools, incentives. If not, there's literally minimal impact to your end beneficiary. So there was one a trip. I would spend a lot of time going to rural schools in Nepal, and I had this habit of asking children if they could have anything they want in the school. Right? What would it be? And most of the students will say, I want a computer lab, I want a football and stuff. And there was this one particular student, his name is Damaram, and he said that he wanted a first aid kit. So we were so curious why he said that question. We went all the way to his village to speak to his parents and also try to catch up with him on an answer. And he said that if the school do not have even the most basic thing like a first aid kit, why should we even demand for more? And he said he was explaining how the students in his school are getting injured from walking 3 hours to get to school and playing in sports. And in the end, they ended up not going to school. So we were really impressed with someone who would give such an answer. I started talking to his dad and asked him, like, are you proud of your son? Where do you see your son going, after he graduates from school? And I remembered very clearly that his dad looked me in the eye and said that he's not planning to further his education because they simply didn't have money at all. And he said that I didn't understand what is it like to live on less than $1.50 a day. It's entirely different. And that was again when I realized that just handouts might not work, right? Even sometimes in this case, scholarship programs might not be as effective as it sounds when you say it, because when you try to put one of the child to a scholarship program, you're actually taking a potential labor off from the family. So we have, because of this idea and this knowledge, we have shifted our focus, and over time we learned that if we are very serious in trying to solve the problem of children dropping out of school in developing countries, we cannot leave parents out of the picture because they are ultimately the ones deciding whether their kids go to school. So our program moving forward will be about focus on creating direct employment for low-income parents, and that will involve income generating work or creating, like I said, creating employment so that they have an income, and with that income they have the choice and agency to spend on things that they really need, which often the case comes up as better nutrition, safer shelters, and long-term investment for their children's education. And I think that's a more sustainable way and something that these people really need.
Yeah. And
Right.
yeah, and it's very interesting that the model that you are using is like human-centered design, where you are really taking the time to, have these conversations with the people you're working with and going to
Sure.
the root of the problem, right? Which
Right.
which I think is really right way to do it.
Right.
So when it comes into like sustainable, employment creation opportunities, I believe like there will be a lot of work in terms of like understanding local needs, working with
Yes.
local organizations. How's that panning out? Because I
Sure.
understand there might be some cultural challenges to overcome.
Right. Right. So you're absolutely right. First of all, the best way to increase local employment is to support local businesses that directly employs the low income people. So we're not, we traditionally, I think a lot of nonprofits out there, what they like to do is they go to a village or like a poor community and they start putting poor villagers, community members into vocational training programs like sewing and handicrafts and stuff like that. Um, and we initially thought of an idea like that, but when we went to interview one of the lady, we saw a broken sewing machine at her home, and turns out the UN was there a couple of months before and gave similar training. But the problem is, just like any other startups, you don't create a market for them, right? A training, you can have the best ideas, uh, you know um, but without a market, it's never going to work out for them. So our approach has always not to go into a community and say, hey, this is what we're going to give you this project and you're going to do it, but instead we identify local businesses that are already thriving but just kind of lack the capacity in terms of funds, technology, or tools, to scale their project. So we will come in as sort of like an investment arm, and we started a foundation called the Village Fund. And I think the easiest way to explain what is it, it's an impact investment arm for poor people. I thought, if the typical venture capitalists can raise so much money for startups, why isn't there a similar fund for the world poorest people? And that's what our approach is going to be. We go to new villages right now, identify local businesses, invest in them so that they can continue to employ low-income people, and that's the most sustainable way. At least that's what we are learning right now.
That's great. Um,
Right.
I'm curious if microfinance is something in Nepal, which how is it
Yeah.
doing? I guess you
Right.
might have had some research or experiences.
Sure. First of all, I think microfinance is a great program that it's evidence based, right? I did a lot of research about that, but not everybody can start a microfinance program. You got to have the capital, the license to operate there. It's really, really complex. I don't think at this stage we have the capacity to do it, but we are doing it in a way that it's much more, there's much lesser risk for us. So, for example, the project that we're doing right now is in a village called Sahasram, and the idea is we are going to set up an enterprise to support the smallholder dairy farmers over there. So all these women, they can bring milk and deposit their milk in a milk collection center, and exchange for an income every single day. So we, first of all, with that we can provide income for all the rural farmers, and with an income we can then start like a micro savings scheme, which kind of operate like a microfinance already, except that it's not an actual institution. It's managed by the committee of farmers over there.
Got it.
And every single time when someone wants to take a loan, they literally loan from their own pool of funds.
Got
So
it.
we can start from there, and hopefully in the future it can expand into an actual microfinance program. But I don't think we're in that space right now.
Yeah. So it's a cooperative, and
Yes, exactly.
that's great. Yeah.
Right.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think another thing which I would like to ask you is like, as you were starting out and throughout the journey, right? Like, what's the best piece of advice you've received in the startup journey so far?
Wow, that's a great question. I think um, the best piece of advice is don't punk out when things get hard. It's meant to be hard, and if you're not in for the game, and I heard one of my mentor actually told me you have to approach this with a sense of humor. because it's going to be so damn hard. And if you take it too seriously, sometimes you burn out, and that's what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs and first-time founders. So I'm really trying to enjoy the process rather than putting all the stress on myself that, hey, if I feel all these villagers and community members are going to be disappointed and stuff. If I approach this as a learning journey and also with a sense of humor, it's all about the journeys and the process. Like as you told me, it's whatever happens is a byproduct.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of mindset I'm approaching my work right now. And so far, I've been enjoying it.
That's great to end this off with. I think we are here for a short time, but we are here for a good time, right?
Right.
So Randall, where can people find you? Where can people find you more about your organization, to learn more, to support it financially? Yeah.
Great. So two things, right? The first thing is, so as you know, for a long time, we've been trying to sell books to raise funds, and that's why we could continue putting 100% of donations received to the field. We're launching an online bookstore, and we put the same thing, 100% of all our net profits directly to our foundation. You can find we are launching it in a week. It's at www.booksbeyondborders.org. And in the next month, we're actually launching our second biggest fundraiser on Give.Asia platform, thanks to you. And this time we'll be raising $20,000 to start a dairy enterprise for the women in the village called Sahasram. So please check out our fundraising page. If not, support us by buying some books. 100% of net profits goes to our foundation.
Thanks, Randall. I'm a big fan of your work, and keep doing what you do. Keep inspiring people and keep changing lives. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. All right. Bye.